If you're a long-term watcher of my videos, then you'll likely be aware of the kill team that I built based around the Raptors chapter. Unfortunately, the mishmash of operators that made up that kill team became illegal shortly after I'd finished, which kind of killed my enthusiasm for them. But it's been a while, and I thought that maybe I should expand this principle even further into a full 2000 point force. Now, if you've been watching my recent live streams, you'll already be aware of the progress that I've made so far. But I thought I'd take advantage of the new Space Marine miniatures that have been released and put together a full build and paint guide. So let's kitbash a full squad of Jump Pack Intercessors of the Raptors chapter.
Are you tired of your dice taking a nosedive off the table when it matters most? You ever find yourself scrambling for a place to stash your gaming gear? Are you constantly cursed with those dreaded wands? Well, fear not, because the Dice Master 3000 is here to rescue your gaming day. Say goodbye to dice disasters and hello to gaming glory. With the Dice Master 3000, you'll roll with precision and style.
Or you can actually give one of these a go, the Dice Companion from Dragon Shield. Now, this is the real deal and is an excellent addition to any gaming setup. These sleek, premium quality trays offer the perfect surface to roll your dice on, which means you can avoid those awkward rolls off the table or the dreaded cocked dice. Unfortunately though, it won't fix those critical failures. Dragon Shield Dice Companions are made from high quality materials, which makes them built to last and also easy to clean. They also come in a couple of different colors as well. But that's not all Dragon Shield has to offer. There is also the Player Companion, which has space for your rulebooks and character sheets, and the even larger Game Master Companion, which comes with heaps of secure storage and even an integrated game screen. Are you ready to elevate your tabletop experience? Well, check out the links both in the description and in the comments below to check out the full range of Dragon Shield Companions, and also enter a sweepstake where you can win a couple of these for yourself. A big thank you to Dragon Shield for sponsoring this video. So, as always, my first task was to prep the first few parts, starting with the Jump Pack Intercessors that were kindly provided to me by Games Workshop. After removing all the parts that were required to assemble the legs and torsos, the mold lines and sprue tabs were removed. It's become quite a common feature of my Space Marine builds to remove their Imperialis symbols from their chests. And yes, I have wrongly referred to them as Aquilers many times before, and I thank the ever pedantic comment section for correcting that. I just feel that having the flat, featureless surface not only makes the armor look a little more imposing, it also allows for extra parts and details to be added. The symbol was removed using a series of shallow cuts to steadily remove the bulk of the plastic. Once things were looking a little flatter, I held my blade at a near perpendicular position against the armor and employed a scraping motion. This final step allowed for a much smoother finish that allowed it to blend better into its surrounding armor. After the Imperialis was removed, the torso and legs were assembled, and the whole process was repeated 4 more times until I was left with these. Following this, all the jump packs were assembled and glued to the torsos, making them all ready for some kitbashing. For those unfamiliar with the Raptors, they're easily summed up by saying they're just Space Marines with a more contemporary military flavor. That generally translates into them featuring fewer of the more ornate details common in Space Marines in favor of more practical equipment. As such, the Phobos kit tends to fit the Raptors theming extremely well, and it was something that I took advantage of in this build. Instead of arming the Jump Intercessors with their usual chainswords and heavy bolt pistols, they were instead equipped with the combat knives and pistols from the Primaris Reavers kit. Continuing with this theme, another Phobos component was attached, this time around being one of the heads taken from the Infiltrator kit. This was finished off with a Phobos shoulder pad over the left arm. The result of mixing and matching these Phobos parts with regular Intercessor or Tacticus armor was that of a variant that lay somewhere between the two. Lighter than Tacticus to allow for greater maneuverability, but also slightly heavier than Phobos to help counteract the rigors of low orbit drops and close combat situations. All in all, helping to emphasize the practicality of the Raptors' ethos. But there was still one more detail to add. Now, I haven't used this one for a while, but it's time for handy storage bits. And by that I mean any pouch, grenade, ammo belt, or any other form of tactical receptacle that you can lay your hands on. There are a few nice components that come with the Jump Intercessor kit, but other good sources are the Phobos range. These should be placed around the waist and ideally should fill out all the available space. In addition to this, you can also affix a few parts of the chest and even the shoulder pads. And with that, the first member of the squad was complete. When building squads like this, I still like to hold on to that kill team aspect of individual specialists, even if they have no specific rules to represent in game. So, for the second member of the squad, I wanted to represent a demolitions expert. To do this, one of the power packs from a Primaris Eradicator was sawed away from the rest of the pack and cleaned up. To hold this demo charge, another Phobos arm, this time from the Incursors, was sawed away from its Haywire mine, so just the handle remained. After a little trimming and adjusting so the parts lined up, the arm handle was glued into place. From here, the arm was attached to the torso, and a few parts from the Phobos Strike Team upgrade sprue were added, specifically the hand holding the detonator and the reinforced helmet, helping to finish off that demo specialist appearance. When it came to the pouches, the same process as before was repeated, along with another canister and more pouches taken from the Eradicator kit. For the Sergeant, my problem was that there weren't any plasma pistol armed Phobos units. There were plenty of Tacticus kits with plasma pistols, but the armor was slightly different from the Phobos. Fortunately, the Hellblaster kit has a bionic arm that gets around this. The bonus here was that the plasma pistol was left-handed, which allowed me to build a dual-wielding Sergeant by attaching a regular pistol to the right arm. Fortunately, the Phobos shoulder sat nicely on the left arm, completing the look. A helmetless head was selected from the Phobos Strike Team sprue, and, to match his paired pistols, a pair of holsters were also attached to the model, along with the usual assortment of pouches. The fourth member would be themed around a Grenadier archetype, with the smoke grenade throwing arm from the Infiltrators being used. The left arm was a regular Reaver knife arm, and the head was from another component from the Infiltrators kit. The model was finished off with yet more pouches, with of course an emphasis on components that featured grenades. The final model was much more straightforward, although the crossed Reaver arms were selected to take advantage of the torso's more dynamic posing. When it came to the pouches, a slight nod to this operative's close combat affinity was added in the form of some paired Incursor blades, which left me with a squad of 5 Raptor-themed Jump Pack Intercessors that were ready to be painted. When it came to painting, my intention was a little more army-focused than maybe some of my other schemes have been. As such, the steps would be consolidated as much as possible, while still having a good-looking scheme at the end of things. This process began with a primer, specifically Vallejo's red-brown primer. As the Raptor's main scheme is green, the reddish-brown would make this colour stand out, whilst also offering a degree of weathering. An airbrush was used to apply this, and was used to coat the entirety of each of the models. For the green of the armour, some olive green from AK Interactive was used. This leans slightly more towards the yellowish side of green, which fits that militaristic style quite nicely. Again, this was applied via an airbrush and was focused mainly towards the upwards facing parts of the model, which left the red primer visible in the recesses. This fed into that contrasting effect while also giving the armour a dirted appearance. The green was then given a second, more focused coat of golden olive. This slightly brighter olive green was focused across the top of the model, helping to create the effect of light falling more onto these areas. With the basic colour of the armour complete, it was time to apply decals. Doing this before any weathering would allow the markings to be covered too, causing them to better blend into the armour. But before any decals could be applied, the areas were first prepped with a coat of gloss varnish. This provides a smoother surface that not only protects the paint beneath, but also allows the transfer to sit close to the surface, reducing that ghosting effect. From here, some transfers were cut out and soaked in some water until they were lifting from their backing paper. For the numerals, I used some decals from the Mighty Brush, which I'll include a link to in the description below. Once these were ready, the transfers were carefully teased away from the paper and into place with a damp brush. After allowing the transfer to dry, they were then coated with a product called Microsol. This is a mild solvent that softens out the decal, allowing it to form across the surface. It might need a couple of coats, but just make sure you allow it to dry between applications. The decal was then finished off with a coat of matte varnish. This not only fixed the transfer in place, it also dulled down the earlier gloss varnish, leaving me with a more painted on look. To give the transfer a slightly worn and faded looking appearance, some dry brushing was employed. To do this, a little of the paint was applied to my texture palette. From here, a slightly dampened Artis Opus dry brush was dipped into the paint and worked through the bristles by using a circular motion across the palette. Once the paint had evenly covered the bristles, a combination of tight circular strokes and stippling was used to build up a thin layer of paint across the transfer. The intention was to give the markings a slightly green tinge to create the effect of the paint fading or wearing away. To give the paintwork a more weathered and damaged effect, some chipping was built up. This was done by taking a piece of foam and tearing it into a rough shape. This was then dipped into some of the reddish brown of Cuirass Leather and stippled across my palette to remove the excess paint. The sponge was then lightly pressed onto the surface of the model, transferring the remaining paint in a series of irregular flecks. The result was the appearance of damaged and chipped paint that was achieved really easily and really quickly. This process was then repeated using some golden olive and an even lighter mixture of golden olive and pastel yellow. Where the previous chipping created the appearance of slightly corroded paint chips, these lighter greens created the effect of shallow scratches and scuffs. These were focused predominantly around the areas that would incur more damage, such as the hands, boots, and shoulder pads. The armor was very nearly complete, but it still had a lot of deep recesses that needed to be darkened down. A wash would be perfect for this, but instead of using a pre-made wash, I decided to make my own by combining some Cygor Brown contrast paint with some airbrush thinner. This mix still benefits from the strength of the contrast paint whilst reducing the viscosity greatly. This wash was targeted directly into the recesses. Here it dried and created the appearance of some reddish-brown shadows, boosting that level of detail whilst complementing the earlier primer color. With the armor complete, the remaining areas of the model were tackled. In order to cut down that painting time, everything that wasn't armor, skin, or lenses was painted with the extremely dark grey of Death Reaper. This was thinned out a little and applied across all of these areas in a couple of coats to achieve a solid base color. The benefit of using a dark grey rather than a black was that a black wash could be applied across those surfaces. The wash pooled into the recesses and helped to add a little more definition to them. From here, the dark grey areas were split into metallics and non-metallics. Anything that wasn't metal, such as the pouches, weapon stock, and sections between the armor, were then highlighted with a mixture of Death Reaper and AK pastel yellow. After this, the remaining dark grey areas were given an edge highlight of Surcoat silver. By just picking out the edges of the metallic areas, it created the effect of a blackened metal that had been scuffed and scratched, revealing the shiny metal that lay beneath. The glowy parts of the models, which were generally limited to the lenses and the helmets, were then coated with some AK pastel yellow, before being given a thin layer of Magmadroth Flames. This intensely orange contrast paint helped to create an extremely bright colour that really stood out against the muted greens around it. The concrete chunks that the Marine stood upon, plus the smoke billowing from the grenade, were given a base coat of Wizard Grey, washed with Battle Mud Wash, and then roughly highlighted with some Carcharodon Grey. For the Sergeant's exposed skin, I began with Barbarian Brawn, followed by a layer of Dwarven Skin, with some finishing highlights of Elven Skin. To give the impression of stubble, a couple of extremely thin layers of Space Wolf Grey were applied to the top of the head until I created a subtle grey colour. With the models themselves completed, work could begin on the bases. Again, the aim here was to keep things simple in order to make painting a full-sized army much more achievable. So a texture paste was chosen, specifically some of AK Interactive's Fireland. This really rich reddish orange is perfect for creating a Mars-like surface. The paste was applied thickly across the base and in an even manner to really sell the effect of uneven ground. This particular colour was chosen to help the greens stand out and give the completed army a striking look on the tabletop. After allowing the paste to fully dry, the outer edge of the base was dry brushed with some Fanatic Orange. This helped to lift out the raised texture left behind from the paste. By focusing around the edges of the base, it created the effect of a shadow being cast by the marine on the ground below it. This was followed up with the even brighter orange flare and was used to cover a slightly narrower strip around the edge of the base than before. But the weathering wasn't done just yet. To emulate the effect of operating on a dusty planet, some Fanatic Orange was heavily thinned out with water. You'll need enough to create a wash-like consistency. This wash was then targeted directly into the recesses of the feet and lower legs. As the paint dried, it gave the impression of dust working its way into the recesses. This creates a similar effect to that of weathering powders, but is a little easier to work with. From here, all that was left to do was to clean up the base rims with some Doom Death Black, and seal in the paintwork with some matte varnish, which left me with this. And so that concludes this guide on kitbashing and painting up some Jump Pack Intercessors of the Raptors. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, this is a part of an ongoing army project, and so while the painting isn't exactly top tier, it's a fairly speedy way of painting up Marines. This was helped massively by sticking to a few core colours and using various weathering stages to cover up a lot of those otherwise time-consuming steps. Now, if you see my previous Raptor guides, you may have noticed that the results here are slightly brighter than the more muted green that I'd used previously. The reasoning behind this was to help them stand out a bit more on the tabletop, where I hope to one day field a full force of these guys. Speaking of which, if you enjoyed this video and would like to see me expand into more units, then please do let me know which units you'd like to see me tackle in the future down in the comments. Now, whether or not you decide to build this particular model yourself, hopefully you managed to pick up something that you found useful for your own projects. But if you would like to recreate these miniatures, then you can find all the parts and paints that I used to build them in the description below. And don't forget to check out some of my previous Raptor conversions for a few ideas as well. But before I go, I just want to give my thanks to my Patreon supporters and channel members who help keep this channel going, especially my Pouch of Dead Animal Bits and above supporters, who are Jonathan Hart, Maciej Savitsky, Morgan, Ryan Little, Swedsman, Tim, Axel Jonsson, Daniel Dowling, Immaterial Creations, Johans, Jonathan Sandsteed, Mr. Grimm, Pale Juice, and the Googles, and my Sergeant level channel members who are Dave, Don Gibbs, The Sire Acquired, Whale Tussler, Mr. Jared Hess 95, Nerdington Paints, Mark Taylor, and Philip Poyer. If you're interested in supporting me, you can hit the join button below or find a link to my Patreon in the description. Supporters get a whole host of benefits, including ad-free access to my videos, sneak peeks, a private Discord channel, and exclusive merchandise. Speaking of merchandise, I also have a few t-shirts and mugs up for sale featuring designs drawn by me. You can check those out by following the links below or by going on over to my peakthewargamer.com website. So until next time, thanks for watching and goodbye.